The night air in New Orleans hung heavy, thick with that familiar mix of jasmine, bourbon, and rain that hadn't quite fallen yet. I just finished setting the last plate on the long oak table, the same one my wife and I bought at an estate sale 50 years ago, when I heard laughter at the gate. My daughter's voice floated in first, bright and a little nervous, followed by the deep, confident tone of my son-in-law. Before we continue, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon, so you never miss a story like this one. They came in with a burst of perfume and camera flash. A few of their friends followed, people I'd never met. Too polished, too loud, too impressed with themselves. I'd expected a quiet dinner, just family. Instead, it felt like a scene being staged. "Jerry," he said, grinning wide. "The man of the hour." I smiled back, though my gut told me something was off. He clapped me on the shoulder, that heavy kind of pat men give when they're trying to remind you who's stronger. My daughter kissed my cheek, eyes darting around the room like she was counting how many angles the cameras could catch. "Just a little toast tonight," he said. "Something special to celebrate family legacy and the future." Legacy. The word always puts a sour taste in my mouth when it comes from him. The guests filled their glasses. Laughter rose and bounced off the high ceilings, echoing through the parlor where once upon a time I used to play trumpet with my band after long nights at the club. The framed photos on the walls watched silently. The old crew, the crowds, my wife in her apron holding a brass ladle like a conductor's baton. He tapped his glass with a fork. "Everyone, if I could have your attention." I leaned back, hands folded in my lap, pretending to enjoy the moment. He reached into his bag and pulled out an iPad, sleek, silver, glowing like something holy. On the screen I saw my townhouse, every brick, every shutter but stripped of its soul. The porch had been widened, the ironwork replaced by glass railings, and where the parlor once stood there was a sleek, neon-lit lounge. "This," he said proudly, "is what comes next for the Carter legacy." He zoomed out, showing a projection. My home turned into a luxury Airbnb called Maison Legacy, a bourbon experience. The guests murmured their approval. My daughter smiled weakly, her hand trembling as she clutched her champagne flute. I didn't speak. I just listened as he talked. About rebranding, cultural monetization, turning nostalgia into profit. Each phrase felt like a slow knife twisting. He clicked through slides of projected income charts, market analysis, and influencer partnerships. The man had turned my life into a pitch deck. Finally, he looked at me. "Jerry, I know how much this place means to you," he said, voice dripping with false warmth. "But it's time to evolve. The city's changing and we should too. You'll have your own suite uptown, fully managed. No worries, no upkeep, no taxes, just peace." Just peace. That's what people say when they plan to bury you quietly. I studied his face for a long moment. He didn't even notice the way my daughter's eyes flicked toward me, then away. She knew this was wrong, but she wouldn't say it. Not in front of him. I looked around the table. Those strangers laughing and nodding like this was entertainment. My memories were wallpaper to them. The room seemed smaller somehow. The chandelier light pressed against my temples. I cleared my throat softly. "And what exactly do I get out of this arrangement?" He grinned, flashing white teeth. "Freedom, Jerry. You get to rest. We'll handle everything. You've done your part for this house. Now let us make it something bigger. Bigger. Always bigger." I thought about the nights after Katrina, when half the city had no power and this old house glowed by candlelight because we shared every flame, every pot of gumbo, every mattress with folks who had nowhere else to go. "Bigger," he said, as if square footage could hold the weight of memory. He slid an envelope across the table. "Draft documents," he said, "just to review. We'll finalize next week. I didn't touch it. I just stared at the envelope until it blurred. My daughter reached for my hand. Dad, maybe it's for the best. You've worked hard your whole life. You deserve comfort now. Comfort. That word again. The kind that sounds like kindness but smells like control. I nodded slowly, forcing a smile. Maybe you're right, I said softly. Maybe it's time to think about what comes next. He raised his glass. To the future. Everyone echoed it. To the future. I clinked my glass too, but my heart stayed still. Somewhere deep inside, a decision had already begun to form. Quiet, steady, certain. As the night went on, I watched them laugh and take pictures beside my piano. They didn't know the keys were out of tune because I hadn't played since my wife died. They didn't know that the floorboards creaked not from age, but from the rhythm of hundreds of dancing feet over decades. They didn't know this house was alive, and that I wasn't about to let anyone turn it into a hollow shell for strangers to pose in. When the last guest left and the door finally closed, I stood in the dark parlor listening to the city hum outside. Somewhere down the street a trumpet cried, slow, mournful, beautiful. I poured myself a drink, neat, and whispered into the empty room. You want my house, son? Let's see what you do when it belongs to everyone but you. The night swallowed my words and the rain finally started to fall. The next morning the house felt heavier than usual, not in weight but in silence. The kind that presses against your ribs when you wake up knowing something's shifted. Something you can't quite name yet, but it's there, sitting in the corner like an uninvited guest. Coffee steamed on the stove, its smell mingling with the faint scent of rain through the cracked shutters. The quarter was waking. Carriage wheels, vendors, a saxophone warming up 2 streets away. I've always loved that sound. It tells me the city's still breathing. I sat at the kitchen table where last night's wine glasses still stood. Lipstick smudges, water rings, crumbs from a cake no one finished. The envelope he'd slid across the table sat there too. I stared at it for a long time before finally opening it. Inside, legal print, neat signatures, and a transfer clause dressed up in courtesy. They'd already filled in the property value, $2,500,000. They'd even marked preliminary consent assumed. I could almost hear him saying it. Just procedural, Jerry, nothing binding yet. My fingers tightened around the paper. The edges trembled. I remembered the first time I walked through this house, 1973. I was 20 years younger and twice as broke. The floorboards were warped, the walls cracked, and the roof leaked so bad I used to keep buckets in every room. But my wife saw something in it. She called it the heartbeat of the street. We rebuilt it together, one paycheck at a time. She sanded, painted, patched, and cooked until the place sang again. Every nail, every hinge, every story. It was ours. Not perfect, not polished, but real. Now it was just another heritage asset in some influencer's portfolio. A knock at the door broke the thought. I opened it to find a courier, young, polite, nervous. He handed me a thick folder. From Mr. Bennett, sir, he said. My son-in-law's name in black ink on the label. Inside were color-printed renderings, mock-ups of Maison Legacy. My living room stripped bare. My kitchen white marble and glass. My wife's framed recipes replaced by neon art spelling out "Eat Local." My chest went cold. I set the folder down and walked out to the porch. Rain had stopped, but the air was damp, soft. Across the street, Mrs. Landry was sweeping her steps. She'd lived there 40 years, lost her husband 2 weeks after mine passed. She waved, and I forced a smile. You all right, Jerry? She called out. Just thinking, I said. She nodded. That's dangerous at our age. She was right. Thinking leads to remembering, and remembering leads to trouble. I looked down Royal Street. Half the houses were still owned by families who'd been here for generations. The other half, bought, flipped, sterilized. Each time I saw a now leasing sign on one of those old porches, I felt something inside me shrink a little. That's when I decided I wasn't going to let mine be next. Inside, I opened the old roll-top desk in the parlor. The keys jingled as I pulled the drawer open. Deeds, tax receipts, photographs, and a small, leather-bound ledger my wife used to keep. Inside were names, musicians who'd eaten here, neighbors we'd helped after the storm, even kids she'd tutored in the evenings. That ledger felt heavier than any property deed could ever be. I flipped through it slowly, page after page of handwritten kindness, and it hit me. This house didn't just belong to me, it belonged to every soul who'd passed through its door. Every plate served, every note played, every prayer whispered. And now, someone wanted to monetize that. The phone rang, sharp and sudden. I picked it up, expecting him. Instead, a soft voice said, "Mr. Carter? This is Elise from the City Museum. We met a few years ago at the Preservation Gala." Elise. Yes, I remember. You were the one saving the old Creole cottages near Jackson Square. She laughed. Trying to, yes. Listen, I read the article about your townhouse in the Times. Beautiful piece. Have you ever considered opening it for a historical tour or exhibit? I looked around the parlor, the trumpet gleaming faintly in the window light. No, I said slowly, but maybe it's time I did. Her tone brightened. We've been looking for an authentic 19th century home still owned by the same family. Something that still breathes the old quarter. Yours would be perfect. Perfect, I repeated. That's a dangerous word, Elise. She chuckled. In our line of work, it's just another way of saying worth saving. We talked for a few minutes about permits, restoration funds, and community programs. When I hung up, the idea wouldn't leave me. Worth saving. That phrase looped through my mind all afternoon, through the creak of floorboards and the soft hum of street jazz. By sunset, I'd poured another drink and watched the light turn gold through the shutters. My daughter texted once. He wants to meet tomorrow to go over paperwork. I didn't reply. Instead, I set my glass down and whispered to the quiet house, "Let him come. Let him think it's all going his way." The streetlights flickered on. The trumpet from earlier drifted back, softer now, almost like a warning. Tomorrow, I thought, he'll make his pitch again. But he doesn't know I've already begun mine. By the next morning, word had already begun to travel. In a city like New Orleans, you can't sneeze without someone turning it into a story. And when the story involves a $1 million house on Royal Street, well, it grows legs before sunrise. I heard the first whisper at the corner cafe. The owner, Marcel, poured my coffee the way he always did. 2 sugars, 1 regretful glance. "Heard your son-in-law's making big moves," he said softly. I stirred my cup. "Big moves, huh?" He leaned in. "Said he's buying you out, turning your place into some kind of boutique thing. The tourists will eat it up." Did he say I was selling? Marcel hesitated. Didn't sound like he asked. That's how it starts here. Not with paperwork, not with lawyers, but with talk. 1 whisper becomes 3, 3 become a rumor, and before you know it, the quarter's already decided your fate. I finished my coffee, left a tip, and walked home slow. The air was thick again, sweet and restless. Street performers tuned up their brass near Jackson Square, and tourists floated by, chasing ghosts they didn't understand. When I turned onto Royal, I saw a white SUV parked across from my gate. He was standing there, my son-in-law, phone in hand, laughing into the camera. "Yeah, man," he said loud enough for me to hear. "Historic district approval's just a formality. We're rebranding the place as Maison Legacy. Think Soho House meets Bourbon Street. He saw me and waved like nothing was wrong. "Jerry, you're famous already. The city's buzzing." I stood on the steps watching him talk. He was live streaming, giving a sneak peek of the house that wasn't his. My daughter stood beside him, silent, her smile thin and hollow. "You're using my home for your commercial?" I asked quietly. He laughed. "Relax, Jerry, it's promotion. The more we build hype, the more value this place gets before the deal's even closed." "Whose deal?" "Ours, of course." He smiled wide, a practiced grin that had probably closed a dozen sales before this one. My daughter met my eyes for a second, then looked away. Her silence said everything. I nodded slowly. "All right," I said. "I'll play along. You do your promotion. I'll be right here." He gave me a thumbs up and turned back to the phone. "See that? Even the original owner's on board." But I wasn't on board. I was planning the shipwreck. When they left, I went inside and pulled the ledger from the drawer again. The one my wife had written in page after page, neat as a hymn. I turned to the last entry, a list of donations she'd made after the hurricane, small checks to local museums and preservation groups. One name stood out: Elise Dubois, City Museum of New Orleans, Preservation Fellowship Fund. That night I called Elise again. "You said the museum's still looking for a live-in exhibit?" Her voice brightened. "We are. We'd need to do inspections, appraisals." "I don't need the money," I said, "but I do need assurance." "Of what kind?" "That the house never becomes a brand, never a hotel, never anyone's investment piece." There was a pause. "You donated outright?" "If I did," I said, "it would have to stay open to the public on weekends. Keep the kitchen, the parlor, the walls as they are. You can clean it, but don't erase it." She was quiet for a long while, then softly, "We can make that happen." I smiled to myself. Good, because I might be calling soon. After we hung up, I walked out to the balcony. The city stretched beneath me, glowing with 1,000 flickering lights. Somewhere down the block, a group of kids played trumpet and tambourine, off-key but alive. I leaned against the railing, listening. Below, neighbors moved like shadows, closing their shutters, calling their children inside. And from the far end of the street, I heard Mrs. Landry's voice float through the air. "Jerry, you all right over there?" "I'm fine," I called back, "just enjoying the music." She laughed softly. "Ain't that what life's for?" It was. Or it used to be. The next day, I went to City Hall to pull the original property file. The clerk, an old friend named Leon, raised an eyebrow. "You thinking of selling, Jerry?" "Thinking of saving," I said. He smirked. "Then you came to the right place." By afternoon, I had everything I needed. The title copy, the deed, the original heritage registration number from 1928. I tucked it all under my arm and headed home. When I turned onto Royal Street again, I noticed new faces taking photos of my house. Tourists, sure, but some were agents, developers. They circled like crows around a fresh carcass. I stepped inside, locked the door, and exhaled. "All right," I whispered. "You want this house so bad, let's see what happens when I give it away." The thought felt dangerous, thrilling, almost musical. The start of a melody I hadn't played in years. I poured myself a drink and sat at the piano. The keys were dusty, uneven, but still faithful. I played a slow, broken tune my wife used to hum when she cooked. Something bluesy, half memory, half promise. Outside, the whispers on Royal Street grew louder. But inside, for the first time in days, the house sang back. The invitation came folded inside a gold envelope, too fancy for family, too calculated to be kind. "Dinner at Arnaud's. 7 p.m. Let's settle this properly." I could almost hear his voice in the ink, smooth and smug, the kind that never asks, only expects. I put on my old gray suit, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar and stage smoke, and walked the 8 blocks to the restaurant. The air was thick with the usual cocktail of jazz, perfume, and humidity. People danced on corners, brass horns rising up like laughter that had learned to survive. But under it all, I felt the quiet hum of something ending. He was already seated when I arrived at a table near the back under a flickering chandelier. My daughter sat beside him, her smile taut as a thread pulled too tight. 2 champagne flutes waited untouched. "Jerry," he said, standing with an exaggerated warmth. "Always punctual, I like that." I nodded and sat. "Let's skip the performance," he laughed. "Straight to business. That's what I love about you." The waiter poured water. He waved him off. "Bring us a bottle of your best Bordeaux," he said. "We're celebrating tonight." I raised an eyebrow. "Celebrating what exactly?" He leaned forward. "The future, Jerry. Our future. I filed the preliminary paperwork this morning. Investors are thrilled. Once you sign, we can start renovations by next month." My fork stopped midair. "You filed before I agreed?" He smiled, calm and cold. "It's just positioning. Optics. People need to see movement. The documents are reversible if you decide otherwise." "If I decide otherwise?" My daughter looked down at her plate, tracing a circle on the rim with her finger. She hadn't said a word yet. I kept my voice even. "And what if I don't sign?" He laughed again, too easily. "Come on, don't make this difficult. You'll still get equity, a small cut of the profits. You'll be set for life." "I'm already set for life," I said. "Jerry," he said, lowering his tone. "Look, I get it. This house means a lot to you. But you're holding on to a past that's gone. This city's changing. You can't stop progress." Progress. That's what they always call destruction when they want to feel noble doing it. He reached into his leather bag and pulled out a folder. "Here's the final agreement. It's clean, fair, and generous." He slid it across the table. The folder landed against my plate with a soft thud. "Take your time," he said, leaning back. "But understand this. If you don't sign soon, I'll have to assume you're unfit to manage your estate. For your own protection, of course." My daughter's head snapped up. "Bennett," he cut her off with a look. "It's standard legal talk, sweetheart." I smiled faintly. "Unfit, huh?" He shrugged. "You're 72, Jerry. The courts tend to favor structure at that age." That was when I felt it. The burn behind my ribs. Not anger exactly, something older, something like insult wrapped in pity. I folded my napkin slowly, neatly. "You know, my wife used to bring me here every year for our anniversary," I said. "She always ordered the turtle soup." He blinked, confused. "That's nice." She said it reminded her that some things are meant to move slow, that rushing ruins the flavor. He chuckled, missing the point. "Times change, Jerry." "They do," I said softly. "And sometimes they change overnight." The waiter arrived with the wine. He poured for all 3 of us. The red caught the candlelight, deep and dark. My daughter lifted her glass but didn't drink. He raised his high. "To the future," he said again. I raised mine too, but only halfway. "Two endings," I murmured. He didn't hear me over the clink of his own toast. Dinner passed in fragments. The sound of forks, the murmur of nearby tables, the faint tremble in my daughter's voice when she finally whispered, "Dad, maybe we can talk about this later at home." I nodded. "Of course, sweetheart." When the check came, he reached for it. I put a hand over his. "Allow me," I said. He looked surprised, maybe even pleased. "That's generous of you," I smiled. "I insist." As he signed the tip, I leaned in. "By the way," I said, keeping my tone casual, "I made a few calls myself today. Some folks at the City Museum are interested in old properties, Real preservationists, they've got vision. Real vision. He looked amused. Museums don't buy real estate, Jerry, they collect dust. I grinned. You'd be surprised what they collect when the price is right. He didn't answer. He thought it was small talk. When we stepped outside, the air hit us thick and warm. The street musicians had gathered across from the restaurant. Trumpet, snare, saxophone, playing something slow, something holy. My daughter hugged me, her arms trembling. Dad, please, just think about it. He's only trying to help. I know, I said, kissing the top of her head. That's what scares me. They walked away together, his arm draped around her shoulders. He turned once and waved, confident like a man who believed the world already belonged to him. I watched until they disappeared around the corner. Then I turned toward the river and started walking. The city shimmered in the distance, lights reflecting off the Mississippi like gold scattered across dark water. Tomorrow, I thought. By tomorrow, this will all be over. I'd already arranged the meeting with Elise for dawn. The paperwork was ready. The trust had agreed to fast-track the process. All that was left was a signature. Mine. As I reached the corner, the band shifted to a familiar tune. I stopped and listened. It was the same song I played the night I met my wife. A slow blues about leaving what you love before it leaves you first. I smiled at the sky, whispered, "You were right, darling. Some things just need time to simmer." Then I walked home through the glow of the street lamps, each step steady, each breath certain. The plan was set. By sunrise, the house wouldn't be mine, or his. Dawn came quietly, sliding through the shutters like a secret. The city was still half asleep. Street sweepers humming down Chartres, the smell of coffee and beignets drifting from the corner stand. A soft fog clung to the cobblestones, curling against the wrought iron fences like smoke that refused to fade. I'd been awake all night, didn't need sleep. Not when a plan's been simmering in your chest long enough. The papers lay on the kitchen table, neatly stacked. I'd read them a dozen times, every line, every clause. The deed, the donation form, the clause that said, "Irrevocable transfer to the City Museum of New Orleans, Historic Preservation Division." Irrevocable, I liked that word. It meant there'd be no undoing this, no lawyer or smooth talk that could reverse it. At 6:30, headlights flashed outside. Elise was right on time. I opened the door before she could knock. She looked younger than I remembered, or maybe it was just the morning light softening everything it touched. She carried a leather folder, pressed tight against her chest. "Mr. Carter," she said, breathless from the walk. "I wasn't sure you'd really go through with this." I smiled. "Call me Jerry. And trust me, I've never been more certain of anything." We sat at the same table where my son-in-law had made his pitch 2 nights before. Now the iPad was gone, the champagne glasses gone, just paper, pen, and a pot of coffee between us. She opened her folder, hands trembling slightly. "I had our legal counsel draft the documents. Once you sign, the property transfers immediately. The city will send surveyors later this week." "Good," I said. "I won't be here." She blinked. "You're leaving?" "For a while, maybe permanently. This house belongs to the people now, not to me, not to him." She hesitated. "You understand this means you'll relinquish all ownership? It'll be public property, under the museum's protection. That's the point." I signed the first page, then the next. My hand didn't shake, not once. When the final stroke was done, I slid the pen across the table and leaned back. "It's yours," I said. Elise exhaled. Relief and disbelief mingled in her smile. "Jerry, this is monumental. The board's going to lose their minds. Do you realize what this means for the quarter? For history?" "It means," I said quietly, "that the vultures will have to find another roof." She laughed, covering her mouth. You really did this out of spite, didn't you? I shook my head. No, out of love. But spite helped me wake up early. We both smiled at that. When she left, the sun was breaking over the rooftops, gold spilling across the street. I stepped out onto the porch and watched the light touch the old shutters, the iron railing. The same steps my wife used to scrub every Saturday morning. For a moment I felt her there beside me, humming under her breath, wiping her hands on her apron, saying, "Oh, well, look at that, Jerry. You finally did something smart." I whispered, "Took me long enough." Then right on cue, the sound of tires on gravel, the white SUV again. He climbed out, crisp shirt, no jacket, sunglasses perched on his head like a crown. My daughter trailed behind, looking small in the morning light. He saw the museum car in the drive and frowned. "What's all this?" "Just company," I said. He walked up the steps, eyes narrowing. "We had an agreement." "No," I said. "You had an assumption." He laughed, sharp and humorless. "Jerry, I don't know what game you're playing, but my investors—" "We'll find another playground," I interrupted. "This house isn't yours to sell, it's not mine anymore either." He froze. "What are you talking about?" I handed him a copy of the signed transfer document. "Read it." He scanned it quickly, color draining from his face. You gave it away? To the city?" "To the museum," I corrected. "It'll stay as it is. Preserved, protected, open to the public. No more flipping, no more branding, no more lies." He stepped back, shaking his head. "You can't do this." "I already did." He turned to my daughter. "You knew about this?" She shook her head, tears already rising. "I swear I didn't." He paced the porch, words stumbling over each other. "You've just destroyed your own legacy, Jerry. Do you know what that property was worth?" "About $2.5 million, I said. "But some things aren't for sale." He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You're insane." "Maybe," I said softly, "but at least I sleep well." He stormed down the steps, shouting into his phone, pacing in the street. I could hear fragments, lawyers, contracts, reversal. But they were just noise now. My daughter stayed where she was, arms wrapped around herself. "Dad, why?" "Because," I said, "he thought owning something meant loving it." I had to remind him that love doesn't come with keys. Her voice broke. "He's going to hate you. He already does, but maybe one day you won't." She wiped her eyes, then turned and walked down the steps slowly. When she reached the street, she looked back once, just once, and I saw her mouth the words, "Thank you," before she followed him. The street fell quiet again. I leaned against the porch railing, the morning sun warm on my face, the faint rhythm of a distant snare drum echoing down Royal Street. It sounded like applause, soft, steady, earned. I took a deep breath and smiled. "Well," I whispered to the house, "looks like you're finally free." Inside, the walls seemed to sigh, the kind of sound wood makes when it remembers what it was built for. I sat at the piano, pressed one key, then another. The notes drifted through the open window, carried off by the wind, finding their place somewhere above the quarter. And for the first time in years, the melody didn't feel lonely. It felt right. By the time I poured my second cup of coffee, the storm had already started. Not the kind that rattles the shutters, but the kind that tears through people's lives faster than any wind ever could. My neighbor, Mrs. Landry, was the first to tell me. She came knocking just after 8, breathless and wide-eyed, her robe still tied unevenly. "Jerry," she said, waving her phone, "have you seen the news?" I hadn't. She turned the screen toward me. A live broadcast. Local philanthropist donates 2.5 million French Quarter townhouse to City Museum. My name crawled across the bottom of the screen in white letters. Below it, a grainy photo of me shaking hands with Elise on the porch, the morning sun blazing over our shoulders. The reporter's voice said, "Jerry Carter, longtime Quarter resident and retired jazz club owner, has officially transferred ownership of his historic Royal Street home to the City Museum of New Orleans. The property will be preserved as a living exhibit honoring local music heritage and community resilience." Mrs. Landry lowered the phone. "Half the Quarter's talking about it already. You just made history, Jerry." I smiled faintly. Funny how quiet it feels for something that loud. She chuckled. "Quiet now, loud later. That's how truth usually starts." After she left, I turned on the radio. They were talking about it there too. Then my phone began to buzz. Texts, missed calls, unknown numbers. Elise had warned me this might happen, but I hadn't expected the noise to come so fast, so sharp. Between the calls, I saw one message that stopped me cold. It was from my daughter. Just 2 words. "He's furious." I didn't reply. Out on the street, cars slowed in front of the house. Strangers snapped pictures, some waved. A news van parked by the corner. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Carter, can we ask why you did it?" I didn't answer. I closed the door and let the world talk to itself. By noon, the online storm had shifted its aim. Bennett, my son-in-law, was trending. Videos from his live stream 2 days earlier had resurfaced. Him boasting about securing the deal, calling the house a branding opportunity. The comment section turned quick and cruel. I sat at the kitchen table with the radio humming and watched the fallout unfold like a slow parade of arrogance collapsing on itself. He posted a statement first, short, cold, defensive. "This was a misunderstanding. I supported my father-in-law's philanthropic vision." But the internet has a way of sniffing out lies. Screenshots of his business proposals appeared within hours. Then recordings, then laughter. Sponsors dropped him. His company's social accounts went silent. The man who once lived online vanished into his own shadow. By evening, the front steps of my house, or the museum's house now, were covered in flowers, postcards, even a few trumpet mouthpieces left by old musicians who remembered the club days. People treated it like a shrine. I watched through the window unseen the way I used to watch the crowd from backstage, listening to the rhythm of admiration rise and fade. Then came another knock, softer this time. It was my daughter, alone, no cameras, no makeup, just her. Eyes swollen, hands trembling. "Dad," she said quietly. I opened the door wider. "Come in." She stepped inside like she was entering sacred ground. Her gaze swept the parlor, the old posters, the piano, the sunlight spilling across the floorboards. It looked the same as it always had, but I could see her seeing it differently. Maybe for the first time. "He's gone," she said. Packed a bag, took the car, said he needs time to think. I nodded. Let him think. Maybe he'll learn something useful. She laughed weakly, then covered her face with her hands. "Everyone's saying you humiliated him." "I didn't humiliate him," I said. "He did that all by himself." She looked up, eyes glassy. "You could have told me what you were planning." "I could have," I said. "But then you'd have tried to stop me." Silence stretched between us, long, uncomfortable, honest. Finally, she whispered, "I don't even know what to say." "Then don't," I said, "just sit." We sat at the table, the same spot where everything had begun, where deals were proposed and undone, where dreams were sold and reclaimed. I poured her a cup of coffee. She wrapped her hands around it like it was the only warm thing left in the world. "You know," I said after a while, "your mother used to say this house listens. It remembers. It forgives, but it never forgets." My daughter nodded slowly. I think I finally understand what she meant. We stayed there a long time, listening to the sound of the city waking back up outside, the distant brass, the rolling drums, the laughter that comes even after heartbreak. When she stood to leave, she turned back at the door. "What happens now?" "Now?" I said. "The house starts over and so do we." She gave a small nod, then stepped into the light. When the door closed, I walked through every room one more time. The kitchen smelled like coffee and rain. The parlor was heavy with sunlight. Upstairs, the old bedroom window caught the evening breeze just right, making the curtains sway like someone had walked past. I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered, "It's done." From somewhere deep in the house, a floorboard creaked, the kind of sound wood makes when it finally settles after holding its breath too long. Outside, the crowd had moved on. The street was quiet again except for a trumpet in the distance, soft and slow, playing a tune I hadn't heard in years. I smiled, closed my eyes, and let it carry me. Tomorrow the museum would send new locks, new signs, new people. But tonight it was still mine in all the ways that mattered. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I'd lost something. I felt like I'd kept it by giving it away. By Monday, it wasn't just a local story anymore. National outlets were running the headline, "Retired Jasmine outsmarts greedy son-in-law. Donates 2.5 million townhouse overnight." Every time I saw the words, I winced a little. Not because they were wrong, but because they were too simple. The world likes tidy stories. Hero, villain, twist. Life's never that clean. Still, I'll admit, there was a quiet pleasure in watching the mighty Bennett tumble from the pedestal he built himself. The morning talk shows ran clips of him bragging about his heritage rebrand idea. Then they played the follow-up. His red-faced denial, his stumble through excuses, his phone recordings were everywhere. Every lie, every boast, all out in the open. The man who lived for the spotlight was finally learning what it felt like to burn under it. I didn't gloat, not outwardly. But there were moments, quiet, small moments, when I'd sip my coffee and think of him squirming, and I'd smile without meaning to. Mrs. Landry came by with a pie and a grin. "You turned the whole internet into a second line, Jerry. They're marching in your honor." I laughed. That's the problem with parades. They move on too fast. Maybe. But they'll still remember the tune. Later that day, Elise called. "You've started something bigger than you think," she said. "We've had 3 more property owners reach out. They want to do the same thing. Donate instead of sell. You've made preservation look like rebellion." I told her it wasn't rebellion. It's just resistance with manners. She laughed. "Whatever it is, it's working." I hung up feeling something I hadn't in a long time. Relevance. Not the kind that comes with attention, but the kind that comes from doing something that matters. Still, the backlash cut both ways. My daughter called that evening, her voice raw. "They're tearing him apart, Dad, online, at work, everywhere. He hasn't left the apartment in days." "He wanted fame," I said softly. "He got it. He's still my husband." "I know," I said, "and you're still my daughter, which is why I hope you learn from both of us. What happens when you choose the wrong kind of love?" Silence stretched between us, thin as a cracked record. I heard her sniff once. "He keeps saying you did it to ruin him." "I didn't do it to ruin anyone," I said. "I did it to save what was worth saving. Mom would have reminded me that men like him can't take what's already given to the world." Her voice broke. "I don't know where to go from here." "Start by remembering who you were before him," I said. "Before all the noise." That was the last time we spoke that week. The next morning, a delivery arrived. 2 official plaques from the museum wrapped in brown paper. One was for the front gate. The Carter House, a living museum of jazz and community heritage. The other was smaller, meant for the kitchen wall. It read, "In memory of those who built, fed, and played here. Preserved by the people of New Orleans." I ran my fingers over the engraved letters and felt something heavy lift from my chest. Around noon, I took a walk down Royal Street. People nodded as I passed. Some clapped my shoulder. One man even tipped his hat and said, "Good on you, Pops. You showed 'em how it's done." But not everyone was smiling. Two men in suits stood across the street, arms crossed, watching me. Real estate lawyers. I could smell them from a block away. They didn't speak, didn't need to. Their silence was its own kind of threat. I walked on. By evening, reporters were back outside, lights glaring, microphones waiting. They wanted more sound, bites, more drama. I gave them none, just a polite wave and a quiet no comment. That night I played the piano again, the same song, the one that had carried me through every loss. My fingers were slower now, but steady. The notes floated through the open window, catching on the humid air. Halfway through the melody, I noticed a figure standing on the sidewalk. My daughter. She didn't come in. She just stood there, arms crossed, watching. When the song ended, she lifted her hand, wiped her eyes, and walked away without a word. I didn't follow. Some wounds need distance to breathe. The next morning, Elise called again. "The mayor wants to meet you," she said. "He wants to give you a preservation award." I laughed. "Tell him I'm busy cleaning my floors. You're a hard man to honor." "I'm just a man trying to stay out of my own headlines." She paused. "You know, Jerry, not everyone would have had the courage to do what you did." "It wasn't courage," I said. "It was clarity. Comes with age, if you're lucky." When the call ended, I sat alone in the parlor, the morning light pooling on the old wood floors. The air smelled of dust and brass polish. I realized then, for the first time in years, the house didn't feel like it was waiting for something to go wrong. It just was. Still, proud, free. Outside, life went on. Vendors shouting, carriages clattering, jazz spilling from a corner bar. The quarter never stopped moving, no matter who stumbled. But inside, I felt peace. Not victory, not revenge, just peace. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't loud. It's the quiet that follows when the noise finally kills itself. The first week after the house opened as part of the museum felt like a second funeral. Quiet, respectful, full of strangers trying to find meaning in rooms that used to hold real lives. They came in pairs, mostly tourists with guidebooks and camera straps, locals who'd heard about the jazz man who gave it all away. They whispered in the halls, read the plaques, peered at photographs like archaeologists sifting through the dust of someone else's love. I stayed out of sight most days, just watching from the corner cafe. It was easier that way. To see the house as part of the city instead of my own heartbeat. But on Thursday afternoon I saw her, my daughter, alone. No cameras, no handlers, no makeup. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, her hair tied back the way her mother used to wear it when she painted the kitchen. She hesitated on the porch before stepping inside, like she was afraid the house might still recognize her as a trespasser. I left my coffee unfinished and followed her at a distance, standing just beyond the threshold. The guide didn't notice her at first. He was explaining to a small group how Mr. Carter and his late wife restored the home after Hurricane Katrina, turning it into a community refuge for musicians and neighbors. My daughter stood at the edge of the group, her arms folded, her eyes darting from wall to wall. The framed photos, the ledger under glass, her mother's handwritten recipes. The guide continued. These pages detail every meal served here during the recovery, hundreds of names, families fed free of charge. I saw her lips part slightly. She reached out and pressed her hand against the glass case that held the ledger, her fingertips trembling. The guide smiled kindly. "You can take a closer look, miss. Most people find it moving," she whispered. "I used to sit at that table while she wrote those names." The guide blinked, uncertain. "You knew them?" She nodded slowly. "They were my parents." The room went still. Even the air seemed to stop moving. A few people murmured softly, respectful. One woman touched her arm and said, "Your mother must have been an angel." My daughter gave a faint smile. "She was. My father, too, just a stubborn one." The group chuckled quietly, then drifted on toward the next room. She stayed behind. When the parlor emptied, I stepped inside. She turned when she heard my footsteps. "Dad," she said, voice catching on the word. "You came," I said. "I had to," she whispered. "Everywhere I go, people keep talking about this place, about you, about what you did. I thought if I walked through it again, maybe I'd understand." I looked around the room. "And?" She exhaled slowly. "I do. Finally." We stood there for a while, the sunlight slanting through the shutters, landing on the old piano like a blessing. She walked over to it and brushed her fingers along the keys. "I used to hate how loud this thing was when I was studying. You used to dance to it when you thought no one was looking." She smiled faintly. "Mom told you that?" "Mom told me everything." Her smile faded. "I miss her." "So do I said. Silence stretched again, not uncomfortable this time, just full like the pause between notes in a song that knows exactly where it's headed next. Finally, she said, "He's gone, Dad, for good. Took his things, left town. No note, just gone." I nodded. "That's all right. Some people leave so we can breathe again." She turned to face me. "Do you hate him?" "No," I said. "I pity him. He never learned what to love." Her eyes glistened. "I think I didn't either. Until now." She walked around the room slowly, tracing every familiar edge. The doorway where she once measured her height. The mantel where her mother kept the good candles. Then she stopped in front of the kitchen display. "They're keeping everything the same." "As close as they can," I said. The museum agreed to open the kitchen on weekends for public classes. Gumbo, jambalaya, the old recipes. I told them your mother would haunt them if they didn't. She laughed, wiping her tears. "She probably would." The curator stepped in then, Elise, smiling softly when she saw us. "I thought I heard voices." "Just ghosts," I said. She smiled at my daughter. "You must be the famous one from the story." My daughter's cheeks flushed. "Famous isn't the word I'd use." Elise tilted her head. "Then how about forgiven?" My daughter froze. I watched her swallow hard. "I hope so," she whispered. Elise looked at me. "We're hosting a small dinner next week to honor the opening. You should both come. The city council, a few musicians, some of the families your wife helped. Nothing fancy, just real people." I glanced at my daughter. "You up for that?" She nodded slowly. "I think I need it." When Elise left, the house grew quiet again. My daughter turned to me, her face softer now. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said finally, "for choosing him over you, for not seeing what mattered." I walked to her and took her hands. "You were trying to build something. You just built it on sand. Now you know where the ground is." She pressed her forehead against my chest and cried. Quiet, trembling sobs that smelled like rain and memory. I let her cry. I'd waited too many years to hold her like that again. When she finally pulled away, her voice was steadier. "Can I help with the classes? Maybe teach. I don't cook like Mom did, but I can learn." I smiled. "You can start with gumbo. I'll show you how to stir the roux without burning it." She laughed through her tears. She always said that was the secret. Patience. She was right. We stood there, two survivors in the ruins of pride, letting the house breathe between us. Outside, the brass band started up again, the same tune they played the morning the museum took ownership. Slow, sweet, full of second chances. My daughter looked toward the door. "Do you hear that?" "I do." "What's it called?" "It's called a second line," I said. "It means even after the funeral, the music keeps going." She smiled. "Then I guess this is ours." The week passed slowly, like an old record dragging under a worn needle. Every day, the museum filled with footsteps, voices, and laughter. The smell of gumbo hung in the air again. Not just any gumbo, but ours. My daughter's hand still trembled when she cooked, but her roux was darkening the way her mother would have liked. She stirred slow, patient, whispering the same thing her mother used to say, "Don't rush what feeds you." The evening of the dinner, the city had that golden shimmer only New Orleans gets, where the air itself seems to hum. I arrived early, wearing the same suit I'd worn the night of my wife's last birthday. The buttons were loose now, but I kept it anyway. Some things shouldn't fit easily. My daughter was already in the kitchen arranging platters of cornbread, shrimp etouffee, and bowls of okra thick enough to stand a spoon in. She looked up when I entered. "You think she'd be proud?" I smiled. "She'd be showing you how to do it better." That made her laugh. It was a soft sound, fragile but alive. The kind of laugh that meant the heart had started stitching itself back together. Guests began arriving just after sunset. Elise led them through the house like a conductor leading an orchestra. There were musicians, old friends, even a few of the families who used to eat here after the storm. The same faces, just weathered, like the house itself. The parlor glowed under candlelight. A small jazz trio tuned up in the corner, trumpet, bass, and a piano that looked older than me. I recognized the trumpeter, Miles Dupree. We'd played together decades ago when Bourbon Street was still wild and dangerous and beautiful all at once. He grinned when he saw me. "You still got that horn, Jerry?" "Maybe," I said, "but I doubt it remembers me." "Music don't forget," he said. "It just waits." The crowd clapped as Elise took the small podium near the staircase. "Friends," she began, "tonight isn't about money or headlines. It's about gratitude. This house survived storms, greed, and time itself, because one man believed history doesn't belong in private hands." The room turned toward me. I felt the heat rise in my face. Elise smiled gently. "Jerry Carter gave us not just a home, but a heartbeat. And tonight we honor that gift, with music, with food, and with community." Applause filled the room, soft and genuine. My daughter slipped her hand into mine. "See what you did?" she whispered. I looked at her. "See what we did?" Miles tapped his trumpet against his palm. "You gonna let me do all the work tonight?" The room chuckled. Elise brought me my old trumpet. Polished, oiled, shining like a second chance. I hadn't touched it in years. My fingers hovered over the valves, stiff at first. Then the memory of it, the weight, the feel, came back. Miles counted off. 1, 2, 3. The first note cracked a little, but the second came smooth, rich, alive. The bass thumped in easy rhythm. The piano rolled under us like river water. The tune was one my wife used to hum while cooking. "Do you know what it means to miss New Orleans?" Halfway through, the whole room began to sway. People clapped. My daughter stood near the kitchen doorway, tears glinting in her eyes, smiling through every note. When the song ended, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of the past, the present, and everything that still had a chance to heal. Miles leaned over. "Still got it, old man." I laughed, breathless. "Barely." After dinner, people lingered in the courtyard. The air was heavy with trumpet echoes and the smell of beignets dusted in sugar. Fireflies blinked above the fountain like tiny stage lights. My daughter sat beside me on the old stone bench, shoes off, wine in hand. "You know," she said softly, "when he left, I thought I'd lost everything. But sitting here, I think maybe I just found where I was supposed to start." "You don't need to start over," I said. "You just need to start true." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Do you forgive me, Dad?" I looked at her for a long moment. The night pressed in around us. The slow rhythm of a drum somewhere down the block. The laughter of strangers who already felt like family. "There's nothing left to forgive," I said. "You came home. That's enough." She set her head on my shoulder. "I wish Mom could see this." "She can," I whispered. "She's in every note that horn plays." We sat there until the candles burned low and the laughter thinned to murmurs. When the guests began to leave, Elise stopped by our table. "You know," she said, smiling, "I think this house sounds happier now." "It should," I said. "It finally found its song again." As the last of the guests disappeared down the street, I stood in the doorway and looked out at the quarter. The moonlight hit the old shutters, the wrought iron balcony, the cobblestones slick with humidity. Every piece of it shimmered like a memory that refused to die. My daughter hugged me once more before heading upstairs to help clean. Her voice trailed down the staircase. Soft, almost singing. I could hear her humming that same tune, the one her mother used to hum when stirring the pot. I smiled, leaned against the doorframe and whispered to the house, "You see, darling?" She found her rhythm. The house seemed to hum back, creaks and echoes, wood and wind, the language of time itself. And in that moment I realized something simple and sacred. Forgiveness doesn't come with words. It comes with music. Morning always comes slow on Royal Street, a soft gold rising behind the rooftops. The smell of chicory coffee drifting from every open window. But that morning felt different. The air itself was still, as if the city was holding its breath. The dinner was behind us. The guests gone, the dishes washed. Yet something lingered, like the last note of a trumpet that refuses to fade. I woke before dawn and sat by the window listening to the quarter stretch awake. Horses clopped on wet pavement, vendors shouted half-heartedly, and somewhere down the block a trumpet practiced scales. Off-key, earnest, beautiful. On the dresser sat an old brass key, heavy, worn smooth by 50 years of turning the same lock. My wife used to keep it on a ribbon near the stove, said it was the heart of the house. Now it was time to give that heart away. The museum was opening early that morning, a ceremony, small but official. Elise had called the night before to say the mayor wanted to attend, that they'd be unveiling the final plaque by the front gate. She'd asked if I'd like to speak. I told her no. The house could speak for itself. By 8, I was dressed and downstairs. The parlor gleamed. Sunlight catching on the old trumpet, the polished floors, the photos lining the walls. My daughter was already there, arranging flowers near the doorway. She looked up and smiled. "Big day," she said softly. "For the house, maybe," I said. "For me, it's just another morning." She set the vase down. "You ready?" I held up the key between 2 fingers. It glinted in the light like a piece of the sun. As I'll ever be. Outside, people gathered. Reporters, museum staff, a few neighbors, musicians setting up near the steps. The street was alive again, not with noise but with warmth. Elise approached, her clipboard tucked under her arm, her eyes bright. "Jerry, I have to say, and this place has already doubled our attendance projections. People come from everywhere just to stand in that kitchen." I smiled. "That's because good cooking outlasts any empire." She laughed. You sure you don't want to say a few words? I've said enough for one lifetime. She nodded, understanding. Then maybe just one gesture? She held out her hand. I placed the key in her palm. It was warm from being held too long. She looked at it for a moment, then at me. You're sure? I've been sure since the day I met you, I said. You see value where others see vacancy. That's rare. She closed her fingers around the key. Thank you, Jerry. We'll keep it safe. I looked past her at the crowd, at the faces of people who'd once been strangers and now felt like family. Mrs. Landry waved from the back, wiping her eyes. The brass band struck the first chord, soft and low. My daughter stepped beside me, slipping her arm through mine. You did it, Dad. No, I said quietly. We did it. The mayor gave a short speech about legacy, community, and how one man's act of generosity had reminded the city who it was. The words drifted past me like wind through trees. I didn't need to hear them, I already knew. When the applause faded, the band began to play. Not loud, not mournful, something in between. A tune halfway between a goodbye and a promise. My daughter leaned closer. What happens now? Now, I said, watching Elise fit the key into the new lock. Now it's theirs? She smiled. And you? I think I'll travel for a while. Maybe see the places your mother always talked about but never reached. Savannah, maybe Charleston, somewhere with old ghosts and good music. She squeezed my arm. You'll come back? If the city calls me. The plaque gleamed as the cloth came off. The Carter House. Preserved by the people of New Orleans. The crowd cheered softly. Cameras flashed, the brass swelled. For a moment, the music folded into something that didn't belong to anyone. A pure sound, born from gratitude and loss and everything in between. I felt my wife in that sound, not as memory but as presence. The laughter in the corner, the hum in the walls, the warmth in the air. I closed my eyes and whispered, "It's done, love. It's finally done." The wind carried the words across the courtyard. When I opened my eyes again, my daughter was looking at me, calm, strong, her hand resting over her heart. You okay? She asked. Better than okay, I said. Free. Elise stepped back to the gate, locking it with the new key. She turned, smiled, and slipped the old brass one into my hand. For you, she said, a souvenir. I turned it over, the metal cool against my skin. It wasn't a symbol of ownership anymore, just remembrance. A bridge between what was and what is. I tucked it into my pocket. Thank you, Elise. The band shifted into a brighter tune, the kind you can't help but walk to. I took one last look at the house. The balcony, the windows, the door. It was alive, breathing, ready for its next century. My daughter kissed my cheek. Wherever you go, don't forget to write. I won't, I said, and if you ever burn the rue again, I'll come back just to haunt you. She laughed, swatting my arm. Fair deal. I turned toward the street. The crowd parted, the brass band leading the way. Trumpets gleaming, drums rolling steady. I followed slow and easy like a man walking in rhythm with his own heartbeat. As I reached the corner, I glanced back one last time. The morning light hit the house just right. The shutters open, the porch bright, the plaque shining gold. It didn't look like mine anymore. And that was exactly how it should be. The music rose behind me and the city swallowed me up. Step by step, note by note, until I was just another old soul drifting through the sound of home. If you felt something in this story, that quiet reminder that love, family, and legacy matter more than wealth, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon.